Alright, let's do this. Hello and welcome to this video. I want to talk about how to use the task manager in QGIS and why you should do it. I will also provide you links to documentation and the code I use in this video. First, let's say why you should use the task manager. Well, sometimes when you use QGIS, the program stops responding. I will show a little example of this. For instance, we use the field calculator and we want to create a new field called address label, which will be text, a long text, and this will have a formula which I will take from the code. It's here. So what this formula will do is concatenate some columns which are in the layer I'm using right now. So I calculate the fields. You have a glimpse here. It's printing label address to QGIS field. I say yes, it's calculating. So far it's not unresponsive, but now when I commit the changes, say save, here in the top left corner, maybe you will get it. Oh yeah, there, ne répond pas, which is French for not responding. So at the moment the program is thinking a lot, and sometimes it starts responding again, but depending on the size of your data or the structure of your code, it will load for hours and you don't know when it will stop. So to prevent this, we will use the task manager and I will show the same example using the task manager. So to use the task manager, we need to use the Python console and we will open a script I already wrote here and then run it. This script will take the layer number 2 here, there is the name, and it will do the exact same thing. If I open the attribute table, you will see that the column isn't there yet. Yeah, the column address label isn't there. I close the attribute table, I run the code, and it's done. It loaded here a memory output, but you can also save it to the hard disk. Everything's possible. And now we open it and we have our address label here. Nicely done and registered. Great. Now, before I explain the code to you, I want to show you the data source I'm using. It's an official data source from the Luxembourgish Open Data website, which is data.public.lu. And the name here is Adresse géoréférencée in English. That would be, well, the same, they didn't translate it. Anyway, I used this dataset, a GeoJSON, which I saved as a shapefile for the purpose of this video. Let's now come to the main part of the video where I explain the code I use. The code I use is here on the right side. Let's pull that bigger. So we have some couple of imports on top we have a function which will be called once the task is finished running. We have a little for loop here to get a layer called by this name. And then the actual source code starts here. This is if you want to reuse the code, adapting it to your own purpose. This is a part you will need to change. For instance, you would need to change this ID here. That's the algorithm ID. Let me show you how to find the ID you will need. Let's say you want to merge vector layers. Then you come here, you hover over the processing algorithm you need, and there on the pop-up you see the algorithm ID, which is native colon merge vector layers. And then the other part of the code you need to adapt is this. That's the parameters which are used by this algorithm. Now, these parameters, they are not always provided somewhere in the documentation, but actually you can you can print them in the Python console using this line, a similar line to this. So let me show you. I copy it here. So this is the ID, the algorithm ID I'm using here. I execute it and you see all the input parameters. I won't go on detail over all the input parameters. And then it will give you the output. That's the output parameter, how to configure the output. And here are the output results. In our case, the input parameters we are using is here. We have an input layer with the variable of input layer. I got it from here. And then the field name we want to add is add label. The field type is 2, which is a text. The field length is 254. The field precision, that's this, the number behind the number of decimals. So in a case of a text, there are 0. The formula we want to use to calculate, and then the output. In our case, we have a memory layer as an output, which will take the layer name followed by the output string here. With these parameters set, in the case of using the processing algorithm on a task, to use a task manager, we use this. We use also the context and the feedback, and you just need to use this processing context and processing feedback. You don't have to make any changes to that. So we declare a task variable with this method and these parameters. So the alg, it's the algorithm here. The params is the parameters here, the context and the feedback. Then we say to the Python what it should do once the task is executed, and it will connect to the task finished function with the parameter context. And on the go, behind the scenes, it will also add the parameters successful and results to the call of the task finished function. And this line is actually the line which will pass the task to the task manager. Once the task manager is done running, as I said, it will go to this function, task finished function. Let's see what's happening here. So in the task finished function, we can get the output layer by using this line context.getMapLayer and the value of the key output from the results dictionary. Then, so there we get the layer, and here we check if the layer exists, if the layer is valid, and then we add it to the map canvas here. All right, basically that's it for this code. It might be a little bit intimidating, but it's still a pretty small code. And as I said, the only things you have to change the code to adapt it to your purpose is change the ID here, use this line and change ID here in the line to call the definition of the input parameters you need and adapt those input parameters here in the parameter dictionary. And here you don't need to change anything. If by any means you need to change the no, I don't need to change it. Well, the input variable, you could change it here and there on the way. Yeah, how to get. Oh yeah, this is something you could need to change as well. Is how do you want to get the layout? There are different ways to get the layer. You could also declare it here. You could, for instance, you could just use a hard disk address like this, like layer.shp, and would int the Python would go and look up this address and get the layer for you. So now that you know about the code, let's head back to QGIS and run it again. We move this layer there, and we have the same. We don't need to select it, any specific layer, and let's run the program again. Here we have the progress bar of the task. Bam, there it is. With the address label freshly printed and saved to the memory layer, which now you can save to your hard disk. Yeah, save features as. You can also save it straight away to the hard disk by changing here the output string to an address referring to your hard disk. There are also other ways to do it, but I might cover that in a future video, or I let you find it out on yourself. Let's now head over to the documentation existing on the source codes. There are the first source I want to give you is the pyQgis developer cookbook. At the current point 15 of the cookbook, there is a chapter tasks doing heavy work in the background. You have an introduction, blah, 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 blah. And then on the bottom you have examples, and the example I covered in this video is the point 15.2.3 task from a processing algorithm. So here you can see another example of a QGIS task run from a processing algorithm. In this case, they print random points in an extent. The second source I can show you is the page using threads in pyQgis 3 from the website opengis.ch. They have different examples from the QGIS website, but they are pretty similar. What do they run here? Well, they run actually the same example with different input values as on the QGIS web page. And you will also see other examples of the other ways to use the QGIS task to make heavy work in QGIS. The last online resource I want to point out is the link where you can find the code I used in this video. Of course, I will link all the different online resources in the description of the video. Alright, let's wrap it up here. If you have any questions regarding the code I wrote used in the video, or other questions regarding the QGIS taskManager, you can leave a comment in the comment section. And yeah, to ask your question, well, the basic and usual stuff you might be aware of. And we might see each other in a future video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.